Hi, thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. The goal of today's webinar is really that participants, many of whom we expect are caring for loved ones, walk away feeling energized and empowered with some new tools to bring to this challenging labor of love. Now I'd like you to meet two special people. Christy Horner, a certified family peer support specialist, is the founder and executive director for Courage to Caregivers, which is a 4-year-old nonprofit that sponsors one-on-one caregiver peer support, meditation classes, and a weekly support group that stresses the importance of taking care of yourself as a caregiver so that you can take better care of those you love. We also have with us Jenny Woodworth. Now, she has a master's in social work, and she is the director of programs for Courage to Caregivers. They both describe themselves as being in the business of preventing caregiver burnout. So welcome, Christy and Jenny.
Thank you so much, Liz. We're so excited to be here to talk about adding some tools to everybody's toolkit today, specifically courage. So we appreciate the opportunity.
Very good. Well, let's get right down to it. Jenny and Christy are going to give a presentation, and then I'll come back on at the end and ask some of your questions. And also during the chat, we will be adding a worksheet. So you can go ahead and take a look at that during the conversation. You guys go ahead and take it away.
That's great. And we encourage you to ask questions in the chat. We'll be answering those at the end, but we have gotten pretty savvy at checking those questions along the way. So in case we see something that comes up in the moment, we'll be sure to address those as well. So let's just get started on our presentation. And we're here to talk about courage. So Natalie, please give us the first poll. We want to know who's in the audience with us live today. And of course, many of you will be watching it on recording, but you can kind of answer this question to yourself and we'll get a sense. Are you a caregiver? Are you an unpaid family caregiver like me? Are you a professional caregiver like Jenny? And many of you may be those as well. Maybe you're both an unpaid family caregiver and a professional caregiver in any capacity. And maybe no, not yet, but you do care, because my guess is everyone on this planet is a carer. So take a look at the poll, and when you think you've got what you want, give us the results. What do we have? Who's in the audience today? We'd love to know. Okay, so we have about 48% are unpaid family caregivers. Then we have no one who associates as a professional caregiver. No one who says they're both. And we have about 52% who say they are not caregivers and yet they care. So thank you for playing along with us on that. It gives us a really good idea, Jenny, of who's in the audience today and how we're addressing everyone. We also understand and appreciate the partnership with Hightower Advisors and know that many of you are financial advisors, wealth managers, in a professional capacity. Many of you are clients of one of those firms. And I could make the case that absolutely everybody is a carer. And here's how. Maybe you're caring for an aging parent or grandparent. Maybe you're caring for a grandchild or a child. Maybe you're caring for a neighbor, friend, or colleague. Maybe you're even caring for a dog or cat. Then you are a caregiver. You're providing care to someone else. And that makes you a caregiver. I'm a caregiver. Jenny's a caregiver as well. I also think that those financial advisors, those wealth managers, are an essential part of the support team for the unpaid family caregiver. So I'm speaking to all of you now, right? So I want you to really cherish those people who are giving you professional financial advice and support. And I know for me personally, my financial wealth managers are providing way more than just quarterly financial banking statements and reports on my portfolio. They're providing, they got to know our family. They're a valued part of our support network. So all of you here, we appreciate you being here with us today. And we're going to be talking courage with you this afternoon. So Jenny, you want to check in?
Sure thing. In addition to getting like the pulse of who's here, we really want to know, how are you feeling today? And the poll is going to give you some options. And if you haven't heard these terms before, these are terms that are kind of new to us as well. During the pandemic, we learned about flourishing and languishing, that many of us started feeling kind of that blah, even when things were better and vaccinations were happening, people still were like, is it okay to do all these things? And we really wanted to help move people towards flourishing, again, that kind of ambition, that motivation. And that's one of our goals. And we know also that people are stuck sometimes. They're feeling stagnant. They are just kind of there. No movement going on. And so I wonder if you wouldn't mind completing a poll about where you fall on this continuum. How are you really feeling today? Single choice, like the poll says. You might be like, oh, I'm in the middle of a couple of those. But think about, your first thought when you saw this. Oh yeah, totally flourishing, totally languishing, totally stuck. Love to hear from you. And if you've got some adjectives about how you're really feeling today and it's not those things, feel free to put those in the chat too. All right. That's an interesting mix. So 43% of you flourishing, 33% languishing, about 24% stuck. Okay, all across the board here. So we do this in every presentation. We talk a little bit about what we do. Again, we are in the caregiver burnout prevention business. And I'm wondering if you've experienced any of these: physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion, or emotional exhaustion. Feel free to put that in the poll as well. And I'll keep talking as this goes on. We know that many people have experienced at least one of these at some moment in their lives, careers, all of those things, that kind of emotional, physical exhaustion, health problems, lack of sleep, trauma, irritability, stress, all of it. Compassion fatigue we define as the physical and mental exhaustion and emotional withdrawal experienced by those who care for sick or traumatized people for an extended period of time. I really want to normalize that. That can be normal for when you're managing an extreme experience, like when you're taking care of an aging parent or taking care of someone with an inconsistent illness, or if you're a professional caregiver, in whatever capacity. I know that isn't typically our live audience right now, but whoever's watching this, you may have had that experience. Oh, here's the poll. Perfect. Yes. Okay. Maybe 15%, but overwhelmingly, yes. 85% of you have experienced one or more of those things: physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion, and emotional exhaustion. Blah. That's how I feel sometimes when I do this slide, just like, because it's hard to talk about. It's tough stuff to talk about. So when we talk about burnout comes on slowly as the stress of caregiving builds. It's just like build, you're getting covered. But compassion fatigue is like, it strikes quickly as your resources hit the empty line. And there's a mix of compassion fatigue and burnout. Some of the symptoms and signs are similar, but we also talk about burnout as having less energy, emotional exhaustion. There's those words again: reduced productivity, motivation, and neglecting your own mental and physical health. So that's my spiel today. It's a little shorter than when we do this presentation, when we know our audience is professional caregivers, but I want you to become familiar with those terms, because you may, or people you love may be struggling with these things as well. So I'm going to talk, a little bit about our solution, just a quick plug for what we do and where we come from. I mean, we asked where you all come from, how you're feeling today. Where we come from, again, is preventing caregiver burnout. And our main why for that is this quote on the screen, that family caregivers experiencing extreme stress have been shown to age prematurely. This level of stress can take as much as 10 years off of a family caregiver's life. And this is something else we included in many of our presentations, just because it is so hard to see in black and white. And we experience this with the people that we support in our programs. So we have programs that are all about wellness and personal growth for caregivers. And we are on a quest and reminder to provide coping strategies for the caregiver. So we often use that whole oxygen mask metaphor. Is it a metaphor? Yeah. So before we want to tell you that you have to have your own oxygen mask on. That's that flight attendant talking to you before helping those around you. And the reason why is that you only have 18 seconds of useful consciousness to get that oxygen mask on before you pass out. So if you were to pass out, what good would you be to those around you? We believe that self-care, and especially that emphasis on wellness, is the oxygen mask for the caregiver. And Liz mentioned our 3 programs in our introduction. We have a peer support program, matching caregivers in need with caregivers who are trained volunteers, a breathing meditation group, and multiple support groups for family caregivers. So that's what we do, and a little bit about how we do it. Christy, let's get into some meat here of our Courage Toolkit.
Yes. So we're huge Brene Brown fans, and she's actually someone that I consider a shiro, and really the inspiration behind Courage in Our Name and talking about being a courageous caregiver. It's one of those essential tools that she's identified towards navigating vulnerability and establishing shame resilience. So you'll see her quote there: vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up when you can't control the outcome. And so much of caregiving is outside of our control. And you're going to hear us saying that over and over and over today. And maybe you're sitting where you're sitting and shaking your head like, yes, this is all out of my control. I just was on another webinar today, listening in, focused on caregivers, where they actually said it's kind of an unfair expectation to put that hero cape on a caregiver. And I was like, ooh, I got that in my image, but it's too late for me to take it out this afternoon. And so I think what's important for me to share about why that's an unfair expectation is because if we think of caregivers as our superheroes, then we're putting all of this hope and want and expectation in them saving our loved ones. And we do admire and trust and respect those paid and unpaid family caregivers who are caring for our loved ones into this category, but I think it might be unfair to think of them as a cape. So that might be coming off the next time we do this, Jenny. It really struck a chord with my heart today because, again, I've cared for a lot of people in my life and I'm still caring. I'm a classic sandwich generation. And I don't necessarily think of myself as the hero. I'm just doing my best to keep my head above water on any given day. So when we talk about courage, we can't not, there's a double negative for you, talk about fear. So fear is this unpleasant feeling caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, a threat, or likely to cause pain. And yet courage is our ability to do something that frightens us and find strength in the face of grief or pain. Fear may cause us to worry, step back from a challenging situation. Courage, on the other hand, allows us to step forward and take a risk. There's a couple analogies here for, fear could be forget everything and run, or we could look at fear as face everything and rise. So that's how we're going to look at it today. We're actually going to look at that fear as fueling our courage as caregivers. And you may be asking, like, how do we do that? How do we do that? Christy and Jenny, how do I do that when I'm tired? It's at the end of my day. It's been a long day. Caregiving's hard. I get it. Factor in any serious or chronic illness, hard on top of hard. We get that too. So we're going to say that it starts with accepting your feelings. And when we avoid fear, it actually fuels or feeds the fear. So don't avoid it. Acknowledge it. Get curious about what you're afraid of. Sit with it. We'll say notice a lot today because it's all about noticing those things that are going on. Where does it live within your body? It's really an embodied experience. Sometimes stress can manifest itself right here as a little crick in my neck, and I'll start to know, ooh, I better pay attention. Something's going on. What are those physical sensations that we experience when we're feeling and thinking, doing something we're scared of, and really start to question your own fear-based or scarcity-based thinking. If I do that, everyone will think, fill in the blank. Or if I say no, people may think I'm fill in the blank. Notice this thinking, acknowledge it, write it down, notice when you're saying those things, and then maybe say it out loud. So when we encourage caregivers to show courage daily, Jenny's going to put this in the chat for us. We've got some tips here. Our first tip is speak up and offer your opinion. Answer a question. Defend someone. Our second tip is express your needs and ask for something. That's really hard. As caregivers, we're really bad at knowing what we need. The third is listen to other points of view without judging or challenging. We're so good at judgment, both self-judgment and judgment of others. Number 4, have a tough conversation with a friend, a coworker, or a loved one. So hard to do, but it builds your courage muscle. Number 5, set boundaries to protect yourself. So really think about your intentions when you're setting those boundaries. We'll talk more about that. 6, any type of public speaking. Jenny and I put on those courage muscles every time we do a presentation like this, and it really fuels us to continue to improve. We don't have it all figured out. We don't do it perfect every time, but we learn from every time we have the chance to do it. Even engaging a stranger in a conversation at the grocery store, in line at the mail, getting your mail or mailing a package, engage in those small conversations, build your courage. 7, say no. No is a complete sentence as part of your own self-care. That's not selfish. That's a good boundary. And then 8, think about the changes you want to make in your life. We encourage you to start small. Everything should be micro right now, as thanks to the pandemic, to bring more joy and peace to your world. What can you do? What are those small things? So how can we support others? Because maybe you're also supporting someone you love who's an unpaid family or a professional caregiver. How can we encourage them to show more courage? Well, caregivers need connection. They need a community of support. So we encourage you, you'll see the ripples throughout our presentation today. We encourage you to be a support to someone else who might need that, to be a community of support to them, just to feel seen, heard, and understood. That's all caregivers want. So how can you show up for your friends and loved ones to help them feel seen, heard, and understood? It's a lot of no judgment, no shame, and unconditional love and acceptance. Those are my tips for today, Jenny.
Love it. I feel like we could do that every presentation. Those are the tips. Good night. Goodbye. Because there's more. We're going to talk about courage, especially micro courage, as the antidote to fear. And Christy's been into that a little bit. And she starts saying, treating courage as a muscle. You have to build strength. And one of our other presentations, we talk about, mindfulness practices and how people are like, well, I got really scared. And so then I tried to breathe and it didn't work. And gently, I would say to you, well, you've never practiced it when you feel good. And it's the same thing. I apologize for the siren in the background. I live in the city, if you can hear it. So you have to build strength. You have to practice. So a great question to cultivate your courage, and this is like taking a personal internal risk as opposed to putting yourself out in the world, is to take a look at your values and asking yourself, how do you want to live? And actually, as Christy was preparing some questions for afterwards, this made me think of this as well. Like, how do you want to live? And Mary Oliver, the poet, been talking about poetry today, one of her famous quotes, and I'm not going to butcher this time because I actually looked it up, Christy. What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And she may not have been talking about values work there, but I'm going to say that here, that this is how you figure out what you want to do with that wild and precious life. And again, Brene Brown, we are fangirls, obviously. She does a great exercise on living into your values. So I'm also going to add that to the chat. If you all can get it to the right. I'm not sure if everyone could see it or just the host and panelists. So this is a great exercise for you, your family, whoever you're working with or living with. to take a look at values. She makes it feel less big and daunting. I know we're talking about micro courage here, but it can start small. It can start on a worksheet at your dining room table. So Brene Brown tells us that courage is to tell the story of who you are with your whole heart, and that vulnerability is the most accurate measure of courage. It takes vulnerability to say, this is what I value, but not this. And that takes a lot of courage when maybe your family or your friends or your community, society have valued all these things, and that you're just expecting to value them. You don't have to. That's why you have to do a little bit of work, figure out what you do value. Courage doesn't have to be grand or heroic. Courage can mean action and effort, but you don't have to climb a mountain. Although here's the mountain they're talking about. You don't have to do that. You can start really small at your dining room table. I know our slide talks about climbing mountains, but sometimes it seems like a lot. Sit at your dining room table, figure out what's important to you. That is also courageous.
I just love that. I also want to point out here that we have one of our breathing exercises here on this slide. We incorporate a lot of mindful movement, meditation as an embodied experience when we often do presentations and have a little more time. We also have, resources around that, but this is one of those easiest ones. And it's more of a mantra in this regard, where you can literally get comfortable and in your space and inhale courage and exhale fear. Or as I'll often say, inhale courage, exhale stress. And you can just repeat that honestly 2 or 3 times throughout your day. And it's amazing the difference of a true deep breath can make in reclaiming your empowerment in the face of emotional distress. So I encourage you to practice some of those techniques as well as you face anything with some micro courage. It's a small way. Letting go and surrender. Jenny, I feel like we could do a whole presentation on letting go and surrender. And here we incorporated into this presentation for sure, because it's a huge part of showing up with courage. It takes a lot of courage to let go. It takes a lot of courage to surrender. So we're going to kind of just cover some letting go 101, because people might be like, yeah, of course it does, Christy and Jenny, but could you give us some tools for how we do that? Letting go 101 is essential to improving your physical and mental health. It just is. And if we've learned anything in the pandemic, it's that we focus on what's most important right now. So it goes back to those values Jenny was just talking about, and reminding ourselves, what are our core values? Myself, my family, and then include your support team in that. They need to know what's important to you as well. And then let those values help to form that letting go part. It allows you to say your best yes. Instead of just like no is a complete sentence, which I do believe, saying your best yes is essential. And when you align it with your values, you're going to be able to make good decisions. Letting go and surrender might sound like negative in this regard. They might sound like, oh, I'm failing if I don't complete something, like unable to finish a task or meet a goal, or just like you're giving up when things get hard. And that's absolutely not true. And we want you to remember, if you remember anything today, it's that letting go is not a negative or bad thing. Both actually show a really high level of insight into your abilities, your capacity, which has all changed in the last 3 years, and your strengths. And when we start to look at any of these things from a position of strength, we can do it better. We all have different strengths, which is why you have a support team, because we all bring a variety of strengths to the table. So when we can reframe letting go and surrender and look at how they can help us to actually grow and improve, then we can see the benefits. And not only the benefits for us, but I know what Jenny and I find with the unpaid family caregivers that we support is that when caregivers start showing up and taking better care of themselves, their own health and well-being, guess what? They're providing healthier, better care to those they love, which in result is creating healthier, stronger, better families. We've seen it. We've seen it over and over and over again. So know that you taking the best care of yourself, you'll provide better care, and you'll create a better, stronger family. The best version that you get to paint all for yourself. Surrender actually means that you've done all you can and you're making a choice to no longer continue the struggle. It takes immense strength to surrender. This shift from control to surrender can be very uncomfortable in the middle, or at the beginning and the middle. But in the end, can bring an immense sense of relief. Control tends to be based on this fear of the unknown. We are attached to a specific outcome and that we think is the best for our loved one. And yet, we don't always acknowledge that we don't have all the answers, let alone get it right. Control may feel like paddling a canoe upstream against the current. That gets real hard and very tiring very fast. But if you let go of the oars and you can go with the flow of the water, you may end up somewhere even better than where you were trying to go in the first place. We had some questions in advance, and this is where I'm talking about here. When we're dealing with some of our aging parents, and trust me, I'm doing that every day here, I had to learn really hard way that it wasn't about how I was looking for them to live the ends in this season of their life. I needed to stop. It wasn't about me. And I needed to ask one really hard question of them. How do you want to live in this season at the end of your life? How do you want to live? And then I had to listen. And I said, okay, how can I best support you to bring that to life? I had to let go, but then I really had to just let it be, because they weren't the choices I was going to make for myself and make my wishes clear for how I want to live in that season of life. But I had to let go of what my expectations were and listen to them, and then just let it be, and just let it be. So we can also let go in order to grow, to improve. We can let go of our negative thoughts, behaviors, beliefs, addictions. Sometimes we're letting go of toxic people. We can also let go of doubt, worry, and fear. And so we'll often talk about finding forgiveness as a matter of letting go, because sometimes it's about making peace. Letting go and letting it be is about finding that peace in the middle. And it might feel like compromise, but truly it's about listening to the other person and what they need, and understand where we come from our position and best supporting the person in need. So sometimes it's about forgiveness of the other person. Sometimes it's about our own self-forgiveness. I'm doing the best I can with what I have in this moment. And I had a caregiver the other day ask me, how do I know if I'm doing the best I can? You are the only one who can answer that question with integrity. Can you look in the mirror and ask if you're doing the best you can with what you have? And what do you need to feel like you are doing that? And then growing in self-compassion. And we have a whole presentation on that too, that Jenny and I love to do, because caregivers are so hard on themselves. The stories they tell themselves that they're not doing the best they can, and how do I know? And all that negative self-talk and the judgment and the shame, it fills our heads, which we love to, caregivers spend a lot of time in their heads. How can we help them get out of their heads and encourage them to show themselves the same tender compassion that they give to their loved ones, they need to give to themselves? That's self-compassion. What would you tell a trusted friend or colleague if they were struggling? Then say it to yourself. So we can be there to support those caregivers that we support by reminding them to use that great self-compassion. And then there's a lot of grief and loss when it comes to caregiving. Mostly it's grief and loss about expectations, and grief and loss about where we thought things were going to be, either in this season of life or in our relationship or for the loved one that we support. And so we want to know, put it in the chat if you haven't already, what have you let go of in the last 2 years? And that's kind of your pandemic pivot. What have you let go? And I'd love to hear what some of them are putting in the chat, Jenny, if you can see that. Otherwise, maybe we'll get Liz to feed us a few.
Well, I think it'd be a great time to just pause. There is a question that maybe we could address right now, while if the chat can.
That's great.
Access, that would be wonderful too. Feel free to use the Q&A if chat is not working. Thank you. So the question in the Q&A is, how do you balance what you need in order for your loved one to be safe and support their need for independence? For example, I want to move some exercise equipment and the computer from my dad's basement to the main floor to eliminate him needing to go down 15 stairs.
So that sounds like they've got the solution. They're going to move it so that they're safe and not going to use the stairs. We just did the same thing. We moved the exercise bike up to my dad's room. But then there also became this question of, could he use, he's 89, can my dad use the exercise bike without supervision? So we had to set it up initially. We had to see if he could get on and off. But then we asked him not to use that exercise bike unless someone was present, until we knew that he was going to build up those muscles again and do a better job. We've also kind of put into place, even though he lives with us in our home, he does have a life alert. He hates to wear the life alert. So we've had to come to a compromise about the life alert. When I leave the house, it needs to be on him because I need that self-assurance. It's about what I need to know that he's going to be safe while I'm away.
The attendee added a little clarification. He doesn't want to move the stuff. Says he's old or good. Yes.
He's being difficult about it. Oh, we know difficult, stubborn. I think the way I have phrased it, and I don't claim to have it all figured out, and I'm not sure it met with 100% enthusiasm on my 89-year-old dad's part, but when I made it about me, I've had enough therapy in my life. I'm not a therapist. Jenny, you are. To know I have to use my best I language. So when you say that you don't want to move it upstairs, I feel concerned that you're going to fall down the stairs. Yes, that might be my catastrophic thinking, that I picture you at the bottom of the stairs trying to get to the exercise equipment, but do it for me. Dad, I know you love me and I know you respect me, but this is how I feel when I worry about you. And when I just started sharing how I feel and my concerns, especially when I'm out of the house, I said, Dad, I can't leave until I know that you're going to be wearing this when I'm gone. And then that's when he succumbed to wearing the life alert when I left, because he didn't want me to worry. And so I said, just do it for me. So that might be one way to attack it, is letting your parent know how you feel about what you worry about and what your concern is. The other thing is you can get an at-home evaluation. We've had at-home PT come and evaluate for daily acts of living, and they could evaluate his ability to take those 15 stairs by himself. And sometimes getting a professional opinion as a second opinion, then it's not you and it takes you out of the middle. Our PT person said, you cannot get on and off that bike alone. Someone has to be in the room with you. And my dad listened to the professional, even though I had said the same thing, like this is the day before, right? Because the professional is the professional. What do I know? I'm just being annoying, the annoying daughter. Does that help our friend with the question? I hope. Two options.
Feel free to ask more, person. Chat is no longer disabled. Wonderful. Thank you so much.
And then, Jenny, do you have anything to add there?
She says, yes, thanks. Or I'm assuming I shouldn't say this person assumes, yes, thanks. Oh, I'm trying to think. I feel like you handled it so well. My parents are aging, but they're still a little bit younger. So I haven't had to maneuver a lot of this. I will, though. Yes. I'm sure. I think as a social worker, I watched even though my grandfather passed away, and he'd been in the ICU for 3 months because no one had thought to do like a living will, because there's no way he would have wanted that. And I remember even 20-ish me at that time was like, why didn't anyone ask me? That is literally what I was doing at the time, was working with elderly people and helping with advanced care planning.
Yeah, so important.
Yeah, so I'm sure it will happen to me. So I know I don't want to get too much into the questions we're asking or we're answering later, but like playing to the strengths of your family. If there's someone in your family that is a social worker or a financial advisor, it's like having that support network. Don't forget that all of our family members have their strengths and we probably focus on their weaknesses a lot, but focusing on their strengths of saying, oh, Jenny actually might do that at her job, ding, ding, ding. Or this person is, a fabulous cook, or this person is, so what are the strengths in your support network, and play on those. So if you have a really convincing brother who is going to say, hey, Dad, I'm going to come down, or I'm going to work out with you if you move to stuff, like, I think it'd be easier for all of us. Play to the strengths of your family, your system. But we'll get more into that soon. If anyone wants to share what you've had to let go of in the year, here's the question. What you've had to let go of in the last 2 years, you can. Maybe we're moving on for that. Touch on grief. Yes, my father passed away. Okay. How can you be a caregiver for someone who is grieving while you're also grieving? Can we parking lot that? I will come back to that, Benita, because I think that's really important. I'm going to jot it down to come back to this. Okay. You are totally welcome. Thank you for being patient. So I'm going to just keep our presentation moving a little bit because I want to leave plenty of time for some of the pre-submitted questions and for things that come up. So I'm going to do a really brief, I should assume many of you are probably not. Is that a double negative too? Clinicians, and you don't need to know about DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. Marsha Linham, who is quoted on the screen, is the mother of that, and really, maybe not coin the phrase, but really embrace the phrase of radical acceptance. So when we're ready to let go, or as we've been saying, let it be, and surrender. So you are experiencing radical acceptance. It's accepting what is not under your control, embracing what is happening right now in a non-judgmental way. So when you wholeheartedly and radically accept emotional or physical pain, it can reduce the suffering they cause. And you might be saying, but I don't wanna. I know. This is a really hard topic, but Christy's like, we could do a whole presentation on this. I'm like, ooh, I have a bunch of crabby people because it is really hard to talk about. But acceptance can be radical because it is that acceptance of reality, whether you like it or not. So when we spend a lot of time fighting what actually is, and when we aren't fighting it, it might seem like we're giving up, but we are just letting it be. We aren't giving up. It's just there. It is reality. We are letting it be. And that's how you move forward instead of saying, I don't wanna, like my 6-year-old would say, and no offense to anyone who said, I don't wanna, because I probably said it at least 3 times today. I don't wanna do that. How do you move towards it? Not so easy. So it is what gets you moving. So when we talked earlier about languishing, being stuck, radical acceptance is a piece of moving you forward towards personal growth, just moving you off the couch sometimes. So we can work towards it by acknowledging the present, even as that present is uncomfortable. You can ask yourself, can you control or change the situation? Like, newsflash, we aren't always in control. And doesn't that feel good? Actually, gosh, I hate answering all the questions all the time. I don't want to be in control. I don't want to be in charge. Sometimes I just want to sit back and go, here it is. Acknowledge what you can control and change. And you can't control or change other people. That's another harsh reality. Let go of judgment. That's something we often say in breath work. Of yourself, definitely. Of the person you're caring for sure. And then all those peripherals, the family members that maybe aren't stepping up in the way you need them to, all those things. Just let that go for a little bit. The past is in the past. Good, bad, ugly, beautiful, it's in the past. And we always encourage some breath work. When you fight reality, your body fights back as well. You tense, you trigger, and that's that physiological response for fight or flight. So those are some tips there. Christy's going to talk a little bit about cultivating courage, strength amidst adversity.
Cultivating courage is the name of the game here. The good news about courage is it's a mindset. You can learn to cultivate more courage. And so here are just a few tips for how we can do that, the ways that we've seen that work with our participants, the caregivers we support. So it's looking at a challenge as reframing that as an opportunity. And again, that concept of reframing is something I learned from Jenny, who's so adept at this, but it has literally been a lifesaver for me because it literally turns a situation from impossible to possible. And this can go for work, in your caregiving, in your daily life, in any relationship. Oh, that's not a challenge. That's an opportunity. You probably regret that you shared that tactic with me, Jenny, because you'll bring a work problem to me and I'll be like, oh, that's not a challenge. Nothing but an opportunity. And it invites curiosity, it invites innovation, it invites this growth mindset to reimagine the situation. And sometimes when we look at life's disappointments, those challenges that we face every single day, it can get real negative real fast. And we can leave the end of the day feeling very depleted of all of our strength, all of our energy, all of what we bring into the world. And this is that chance to turn that around and say, oh, wait a second. What did I learn today? How did I grow today? And what could I do differently tomorrow? Sometimes it's about asking the right questions. It's about seeking to understand. So when a challenge comes your way from a loved one in caregiving, it's usually a strong emotional reaction is what my experience has been. And so it's getting to the root of why, what is going on underneath. And so we really have to dig deep sometimes to understand their pain stories, to better understand the situation. Then we like to talk about stepping outside your comfort zone, something Jenny's really good at that she's taught me about, but it's definitely a way to cultivate courage. And it's absolutely where that magic happens. It's outside of your comfort zone. We got so comfortable at home during the pandemic that pushing ourselves outside of those comfort zones to try new things and to do things in a different way, or even to revisit things we used to do before the pandemic, is now pushing us outside that comfort zone we've found that starts making us feel stronger and realizing we can take on difficult situations. We can try new things. Sometimes it's just a challenge is seen as like a conversation ender, like I've come up against a hard stop, or really, is it just an invitation to pivot and open ourselves to taking a new direction? And we see this in caregiving all the time. Well, that didn't work. How am I going to pivot and try something different? Okay, I didn't get that response that I was looking for. How can I try even a different route to getting closer to an understanding? Stepping outside your comfort zone and trying things that aren't within your norm are definitely a way to do that. And then embracing this concept of a growth mindset. We don't have it all figured out yet. We continue to learn every single day. And one of the greatest ways I learn is by failing and making mistakes. So being willing to put yourself out there and make some mistakes. The goal is never to make a grave mistake, something that's so, life-threatening, but do it within that comfort of knowing that sometimes we have to take those risks and step out a little, edgier than we would normally to learn something new. Own that mistake, acknowledge it, share it, and then move forward with that learning. That's how we can push through. That's how we can find those strengths amidst the adversities of caregiving, which get thrown at us every single day. Every single day they do. Caregivers are some of the strongest people I know because they've overcome 100% of their hardest days so far. So now we're going to talk about that concept of feeling stuck again, because that's what we're seeing right now. A lot of that.
Yeah. So again, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but because you rated yourself where you are on this spectrum of languishing, flourishing, or stuck. And we first came across languishing and flourishing. Adam Grant wrote an article 2021 for the New York Times about this kind of feeling emotion, not a diagnosis, feeling emotion. And then there was a response wasn't written by Adam Grant, but it was about flourishing. What's the opposite of languishing? It's flourishing. And then you have folks that are stuck in the middle. I wonder, I know we aren't the only people with tips and tricks and tools out there. Anybody want to share what your go-to strategy is for when you feel stuck? I always like just a change of perspective. I like to get outside. I shared last time we did this presentation when I was a little bit more into yoga, I used to stand on my head because it would just literally change my perspective. Oh, here I am, like, how do I think about things differently? Really changing up my scenery, literally in that case. I was looking at everything in a whole different way. Anybody else taking a walk? Yes, that's a classic one. Good one for me too. Exercise, yeah.
I love time in nature or any kind of pet therapy possible.
I like asking other people, but normalizing of, ugh, I feel awful. What have you done? Prayer, excellent. What have other people done when they felt this way? Or also like, kind of asking people what their perception of me. Do they see, what are strengths do they see in me? Again, I focus on my weaknesses a lot, like many of us do. And so another way to, when I'm feeling stuck, when I'm mirrored in those weaknesses, asking friends, asking colleagues, what do you see? When have you seen me get past something like this? Walking, exercising, yes. Wonderful. I love these. These are definitely some of my go-tos as well. Anybody else? Okay. Christy, you want to talk about the 7 C's?
We just love talking about the 7 C's. START is hardly a Christy and Jenny concept. It's based on the 3 C's of recovery. And yet we, courage is in our name. We can't help but add in the other to bring it to 7 C's. But honestly, this is something you could put up and post, take a quick picture if you want. This is one of our healthiest, strongest coping strategies because they're just reminders, right? No matter what caregiving throws at us, I did not cause it. I cannot cure it. I absolutely cannot control it. I can't change it. And yet I can have courage, compassion, and I can cope. I can cope and manage the stress of caregiving. We cannot remove the stress of caregiving, yet you have so many rich tools, and we hope you picked up at least one more today from us to cope and manage that stress of caregiving. Or maybe it's just the daily stress of life. Life can be stressful. A little bit of stress isn't bad. It's what's kept us alive all these years. But these are our, favorite kind of mantra, if you will. And then we have our courage toolkit. And we're going to put that in the chat for you as well as a handout. So you don't need to take a picture of this because your resolution won't be too great. And this is just a really fun visual for us to remind you that you can cultivate your courage. You can grow that courage muscle to face anything hard. You can do it. And you can do it with support, and you can do it with connection. And you can do it with that support team that you have around you. So we love looking at this as a courage toolkit. We know that absolutely all of you have a very full toolbox. Very full toolbox. I have a huge toolbox. As a matter of fact, let's just say when something breaks in the house, maybe it's like the leg coming off the table and I need to fix it. And I send one of the kids, hey, go get that screwdriver from the toolbox. And they're like, we can't find a screwdriver. We've got 14 screwdrivers in that toolbox. In the moment of crisis, sometimes we can't find our toolbox. Sometimes we can't find the one tool we need, or we just forget. So in the crisis of the moment, we can't dig out our own tools. So let this be your permission to dust off all those tools in your toolbox. Again, maybe add 1 or 2 more here from today to that toolbox so that you can better cope and manage with the stress of caregiving. Oops, I missed a slide, Jenny. Sorry about that. There we go. Oh.
Okay. Well, you're human. It's okay.
I am.
This is an amazing segue slide really into the caregiver journey, because we're going to talk more about the questions that we just got another one in the Q&A and that have been submitted previously. So, I mean, any caregiving, I mean, honestly, your human life is a journey. It isn't this straight line of just, I was born, I lived, I died. It's, you know, it's all over the place. And that's okay. Everyone's life and journey is all over the place. So I want to just, these are some of the things you may see in your caregiver journey: awareness, acceptance, acknowledgement, courage, compassion, resilience. And I want to get to some questions now. So thank you all so much for listening to our presentation. Christy, yes, connect with us, please. There's our contact information. You can reach out to Hightower as well, potentially, for our contact information if you don't have it. You don't end up with these slides. So thanks. It is, you know, getting dark at 4:51. I'm gonna just open a blind here. Can't win with the sun here today.
Liz, what are some of the questions coming in?
Yeah. Jenny and Christy, thank you so much for that presentation. I thought that was great. Some of the tools that you provided, as well as this whole idea of letting go of what we can't control. I find that is something that could be very useful. But we did have a couple of questions that some people have written in, saying they were hoping to get some suggestions for warning signs that a parent needs more help. And as a second part of that, how you can really help somebody agree to accept that help and understand that they are not as independent as they think they are.
I would always say to start, again, I'm supporting 2 aging parents. We've been through this. Always starting with the primary care physician is the place to start, and having a conversation. One of my parents, one of us, my sisters or I, go into every appointment. And we go under the guise of scribing notes, because it's a lot for them at a certain point in aging and capacity to take in what the doctors are saying. So then they come in with their questions, we are taking notes, but then we're offering that, hey, we're seeing some of this, you know, do you have any advice or suggestions, or what are you seeing, doctor, and what they see? Because again, hearing from that professional about, and they can then order additional assessments so that you don't have to be that person. As far as warning signs that we've seen, it's, you know, we thought navigating the car situation and when to take the car keys away was going to be one of the hardest, but both of them self-selected because they saw that they were no longer able to feel safe when driving. So that's usually one of your first red flags. Some parents who have some early signs of dementia, though, aren't aware and think they're just fine driving. So again, getting a professional assessment and requiring that via the primary care is a great next step for driving. I think their daily acts of living. So that just, you know, daily hygiene, taking care of their own needs are some of those early flags, and then identifying what kinds of support is necessary to encourage them to take care of themselves. As, you know, are they brushing their teeth? Are they combing their hair? Are they remembering to shower? Are they eating healthy? Are they able to go grocery shopping? Are they eating a well-balanced, you know, meals and all of those things? And then finding the right support to fill in, realizing that there is help available with all of those things. Jenny, what would you add? I noticed you added a metric in our comments.
Yeah, that's actually what I'm gonna put in the chat right now. I'm assuming if this is an Alzheimer's / dementia potential, that alzheimers.org, alz.org has a great 10 signs. So what they're looking at here is normal aging versus Alzheimer's and dementia. And this can really be a place that you can start the conversation from, of like, hey, normal, not normal. Because everyone is going to have some normal signs of aging. Not everyone is going to have signs of dementia and Alzheimer's. So please,
also,
resource.
yeah, right. I'm just going to also say that people like Jenny, so social workers and case managers, you really want to find yourself a case manager in that season of life. I'll put a little plug for one of our community partners, available on our website, a direct link to their website, Benjamin Rose Institute on Aging, right here in Cleveland, Ohio, but they serve caregivers and their families nationwide. They do provide case management. Also, your local areas on aging can provide that also, resources, navigation, and case management for loved ones with disabilities, as well as the aging population. And those are two really great resources to help you navigate those, because it's overwhelming, and it removes you from the decision making and allows professionals to come in to do that.
Another question that we had come in has to do with how to coordinate care when there are some family members who are helping, and then there are other family members who seem not only not to be helping, but mostly criticizing the actions that others are taking. Do you have any suggestions for dealing with this kind of problem?
And a lot of that's just managing hard conversations, which I'll let Jenny, our local therapist, talk about that perhaps. I know within my family, it's about having a lot of regular family meetings. And then we also try to schedule those family meetings and not just talk about mom and dad, but also try to do something fun, because real quickly we started to realize, my two sisters and I, that all of our family meetings were discussing our parents and their aging and their health issues. And then we forgot what fun and joy was. And so that's when that tension built. That's when that resentment built. One lives with me in the house, and I didn't like how I started to feel when others couldn't help as much during the pandemic because we were all isolating. And so having regularly scheduled family meetings, changing up who facilitates that. And if it's really tense, then encouraging you to have a case manager or social manager, or even a counselor or therapist to navigate those family meetings for you. And remembering to infuse some joy. We step outside of our caregiving role and make a pact to not talk about mom and dad for a whole hour, and take all of our pack of dogs on a walk, and not talk about, we promised we're not talking about mom and dad today, because we had to find joy again, that joy of our sisterhood. And we are all very close, but it can be very tense. So my suggestion is include a professional when it just becomes too hard. Accepting help is one of the best forms of courage and strength that you can use, is asking for help.
Yeah, I can piggyback a little bit on this response, and I want to make sure we get to the question in the chat too that I delayed. So maybe we can do that one next, Liz. So navigating difficult conversations, I really feel like it comes down to, again, there's I statements. I feel like I am in charge of finances, physical care, emotional care for our loved one. I need support. Playing again to strengths. If there are obvious strengths in your family unit, maybe a little buttering up. You are really good at meal planning, Christy, and you are, and so I'd love if you and I could work together to get mom some freezer meals for the month. Or so playing on strengths, and also assertive versus aggressive communication. I just said that earlier. It is so easy for many of us, me, to go to like that passive aggressive, I do it all happens to me. That instantly puts people on the defense. But so instead, just kind of stating facts. She lives here. I do these things. I need support, as opposed to, I don't have to tell you the way it could go the other way, so being real, clear, honest, and communicating with I statements, it's a great place to start. There are wonderful resources online about assertive, effective communication. Please go there as well. So,
and we are running right up to the end of the webinar, but I will, Jenny, give you a quick moment to answer our question that someone asked about how you can be a caregiver for somebody who's grieving while you are also grieving.
I could not answer that in a minute, but I am going to do my best to say sit in that grief together, because it's not avoidable. And again, it will normalize the experience of both of you feeling overwhelmed. Now, I don't want you to get down forever in that pit of despair, but joining each other there for a while makes utter sense.
Mm-hmm. And that's empathy. That's empathy right there. Joining your person, sitting with them, throw yourself a pity party and a grief and loss, and then help each other up and out.
Jenny, Christy. Thank you both for joining us for the webinar and for giving us all a few new tools in our caregiving responsibilities. Thanks again.
Our pleasure. Thanks for including us.